broadcasting live now. Here is the Hangout event. And no one is in here yet. So Alright, Danny should be jumping on pretty soon. He's going to be leading this. I think everybody's in the wrong hangout, so jump on now.
Hey.
Hey.
So I guess there was another. Christian and I were in a different one.
Okay.
And hopefully Aaron will get in there too. I'm actually surprised. I won't be surprised if he doesn't get in though. I'm surprised he got on at all if he was in the car.
All right.
All right.
Good. All right. So they just clicked on the other hangout.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, guys, what do you think? Should we get started?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. All right. So you just want me to get going?
Whenever you're ready.
All right. Cool.
Unless we know somebody else is coming.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Let me try to get this going. Can you guys see my screen all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to go over today is the idea of how you communicate between different different components, and in general how you interact with those, and how in general you can interact with those components to do some pretty cool stuff without having to muck around with a lot of API and code behind the scenes. So this is the example that that I've actually been working on with Eric for a while is unfortunately a connection with GoInstant, which just recently announced that they're shutting down at the end of the month. But the ideas behind it are sound and should be can be applied to other stuff. So the idea is that I have two elements. I have a connection. The way that GoInstant works is that you have your account, your app, and then a room is an instance of your app on their servers, and then a key is like a collection in Mongo or a table in SQL. So what you do is you give it an account and an app name, and the room that you want to join. By default, it's lobby. And then you tell it the collection that you want to get. Their queries are structured very, very similar to MongoDB. And then the order that you want the data to come back in. And then all you have to do is you grab your reference to the element, and you listen on that element for the got data event, and that when that comes back, it's going to have all of your return data in it for you. Now, what's interesting about this type of setup is that all you have to do to interact with it, so the end developer doesn't have to mess around with the API, which we'll get into in a second. All they have to worry about is manipulating these attributes, which is one of the first things that a front-end developer is going to know how to do. So if I bring up our browser with it running, by default, it runs the query that's been defined in the GoData element, and returns things in my collection that are have an author of either Stan Lee or Robert Kirkman. Now, my other down here is just I'm just looping through my buttons to bind the new queries. But it's the same type of thing. So all I have to do is I'm changing the query to empty, or to just Robert Kirkman, or to just Stan Lee. And then when I click the buttons for all Robert Kirkman or Stan Lee, I'm automatically getting all this data back without having to go through the GoInstant API again. And so the way that that's happening, and so just to show you, because I've got my name in there somewhere. If I just want another one. And ideally, it'll automatically come back with just the one thing in there that the one thing that has the author of Danny in it. So it's really, really easy to interact with after everything is all set up. All you have to do is listen on your element for the event. So I have it broken up into two elements, and this is partially just to experiment with communication between the two. So I just have my connection I'm setting up my connection for Go instance, and I have a helper that's just passing in a callback and is firing my connected event, which bubbles out to anyone who wants to listen to it. And this room changed is one of the important parts. So this syntax is used by Polymer to specify. So I have a room, and I have room changed. That means that whenever that attribute is changed, it's going to fire whatever I have inside of it. So when you have something like that that's attached to one of your attributes, like room is here, whenever somebody changes the room attribute, it's going to fire the new event, or it's going to fire your method and do whatever it is you're telling it. In this case, it's just helping to make sure if something's initiated, so it doesn't run the request too many times. And that's all this bit is here too. Attach just runs right when after the element is attached to the DOM. So the meteor part of it, and where a lot of the communication comes back and forth. So this is firing an event that's going to contain contains the connection result from this. You have to establish a connection, and then off of that connection, you can join rooms and access your data. So the GoData one, first off, down at the bottom, I'm just listening up to the parent, and I'm listening for that connected event. And once it's created, I'm storing a copy of it, of the connection, and of the key that's supposed to be that I'm using text. So getting an instance of the collection, not the actual data, but getting a reference to the collection rather, and I'm firing the event that I have the key. And so these are things that you could you could intercept from outside if you wanted to. And then I'm listening for that got key event, initializing to true, and then this find helper is where where the query is happening, which is up. So this is get key, and then my find method, which you pass in the key, your query parameters, your search order, and then a callback. Parse the string, get everything, grab everything, pass it into the query object, and then execute the query here. List for error, callback, all that fun stuff. So I'm passing. So that's how. So passing the data back and passing the connection back down to its child for the connection event, and then it's the same thing with all the actual magical looking stuff that happens. Is you have your key query in your order, and then you just listen for anything to be changed on those. So you listen for if somebody changes the key. So if you want to go into a different collection query, if you want to execute a different query, or if you want to change the order, all that fun stuff. So all these things I'm talking about have been specific to GoInstant, but you think about any other non-UI, so a database that you might want to, so you have a connection to your database on your server that you want to connect to. You can do these kind of things to allow really a fairly elegant layer of abstraction on top of an API that somebody else doesn't have to. So somebody else doesn't have to come in. They don't have to mess with like, all right, I need to make sure that I get the key at the right time. I need to make sure that that my find function is set up correctly. All you have to do is change attributes on one element or multiple elements or however you want to do it. And then again, you just have to listen for that event that's been sent out to the world, and you're automatically just prepared to go at it.
So Danny, I'm sorry. Can I ask a question about it?
Sure.
So for those attributes, they are being watched, right?
Yes.
So using mutation observers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So internally, like if I had another Go room, which would be rooms are just areas to store data in case people don't know, in GoInstant, at least until August 31st.
Yeah.
So what would be the best way to get my two components that are siblings to talk to each other?
So if you had, like Eric said, I just have the one here, but if you wanted to break room out into its own thing, the best idea is that a lot of times the siblings don't necessarily need to know about each other, but the parent needs to be aware of everything that all of the siblings are doing. So your room element would fire off information, would fire an event off, and then your parent would be aware that that's happening. So that's not exactly the way that I have everything set up here, but so like the idea is that this Go Connect parent would actually be, the parent element would be responsible for a lot of I imagine would be responsible for a lot more of the actual things that are happening, and then it's just always aware of what's going on in its children, which are where the events are being bubbled up to that.
So how are you doing this now with that? Because it's been a while since I looked at the code.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
So.
Because like with Angular and other frameworks that are not web components.
Yeah.
I've had to take the Polymer elements and use mutation observers to watch them, right?
Right.
So that I can use the attributes as a controller, like you're saying, which seems to be a good fit for this type of application. Can you talk about that?
Can you? I lost you for a little bit there a few minutes ago. Can you go back like a minute or so?
Yeah. So I was saying that having using something like Angular or React or whatever
Right.
as like an application container that watches these elements with mutation observers, and every time an attribute changes, it triggers an event that can watch. And having a main container element could do the same thing. But how are you hooking it up that way?
So right now, the way that these are being hooked up is that the like I said, it's kind of backwards here because what's having to happen is that the data element is actually having to listen up to its parent to get all. Ideally, what would be happening is that your parent container would act as a controller pretty much and stitch all the things together, and that's not exactly the way that it's working here. So what's happening now is that the connection is made, and then I'm listening up to the parent to get that connection. And then after that connection is made, then the event, then the communication is sent back saying like, okay, we've got everything. Here's all of here's all the data, and it fires off, and that's when it fires off the data event.
Okay, and this is the Go data HTML. This is where you're declaring the Polymer element.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, the connection element is being defined in this file, and then the data element is being defined in this file. So they're not strictly, and this is one of the things where it's not generic enough, because ideally you should be able, anything that you put under there, it should be able to be like the parent should be able to just look and figure out what's going on. This is a little bit. I mean, you can even see I don't like this part right here. This is the part that feels a little bit. It feels a little bit like a shortcut. It doesn't feel like it's exactly what should be, how everything should be set up. It's just the way that I got it to work the first time, and has been working pretty well.
Yeah, I think we found that if you're just nesting, at least correct me if you disagree. But
Yeah.
when we were working on this, we tried doing deep nesting, so we'd have 2 or 3 levels of components nested,
Mm-hmm.
and that became a chain gang of mutation observers watching these things. So it was difficult to handle it that way. So you're using the custom events because of that, because it pierces up through the shadow roots and through the entire DOM. So any element, regardless of encapsulation, can still listen to these events.
Yeah, everything's going to get bubbled up to your top layer, or I mean, it's going to get bubbled up just to the DOM. So you can fire anything out that way, which I also like. And Polymer actually has a really good section on their website, and if I can find it again, I'll post a link to it, about communication techniques. And the way that the recommended way is with events, because one, like you said, it allows you to encapsulate however deep you want, and as long as you're firing out these events, you have things that you can listen to. And then the other thing I like about that is that since you're bubbling all these things up, you can intercept it in different, depending on what you're doing on an application, you can intercept things at different areas, and at different levels of whatever the chain is. So if for some reason you needed to, you could you can figure out, like, all right, this is when I've started to make the connection. This is when I have the connection. I have the key. I have the data back, and that entire process. So you can do things along the entire way, not just in your elements, but for like I said, the end developer that hopefully would be using it.
Right. So part of me feels like the events defeat the whole awesomeness of encapsulation with the Shadow DOM.
Well, they do.
But part of me kind of thinks, well, that's the simplest way that I know how to do that too.
Well, the thing about the events.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So I mean, I kind of agree, but the way that I kind of view the events is that in the same way that I view because everything is very, very the same way with the attributes. Everything's very, very encapsulated. So if you just picture it as a straight line across, and then you have these little tunnels, which are your attributes that are letting you access and change things in and out, and that's how the events are getting things back out to you as well. They're not encapsulated, but only because you've decided that they're not encapsulated. It's not just something that you can't break into it somewhere where you haven't decided it's okay to tap into it. So rather than actually rather than a crack in the encapsulation, it's like a nice little tube.
Yeah, I think that's nice. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Like James and Aaron, have you guys ever have you done much with this? Or not?
Yeah. I don't. Actually, Aaron and I were talking about it. He was over here the other weekend, and I was blabbing to him about Polymer stuff and about this type of application, because the non UI components are the ones that I think are particularly interesting because they're more abstract.
Right.
And just the way that you have to think about it, it's really easy to think about a UI component. Not as easy to wrap your head about exactly how this can actually help. You know, why doing something this way would be any better than just writing it in like a utility library or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you guys agree? But just based on that, does this type of thing? I know this is kind of a little off topic from just the communication techniques, but does this kind of thing make sense as a layer of abstraction away from an API, or do utility libraries, if we're not thinking about actual compatibility, does this kind of thing make sense to wrap an API in as opposed to a utility library?
For me, the jury's kind of out on it. I'm still waiting to see how it works out for everybody else, to be completely honest. It's an intriguing idea, though, and you're right about the abstraction being a little awkward to wrap your head around. Why would you do this versus just drop in some library if there's no UI component involved in it?
Right.
I'm not quite sure on that. And it strikes me as being similar to things like, dependency injection in Angular in that way,
Right.
like where you don't really get the idea of how it's a real benefit until you start using it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen like as an example different solutions with Angular because that's the framework I'm most familiar with. So like they will have you'll find for D3 is a great example of a third-party library that has a lot of stuff out there. So
Yeah.
you have like there's like whole sets of directives that do all this awesome UI stuff, but there's also like a lot of people rolling their own services to pull in the actual full the full JavaScript for D3's library, and then injecting it as a dependency through there, like you would through require or something like that. I don't know if that's a good pattern. It seems
Yeah, that's
a little extra, but
yeah.
Well, I've seen one which, an example that Kevin Moore, I think his name is, from Google, uses. And he basically has something like a service or something like a service component, which he puts into the main document, and then any other Polymer component which he wants to use it, because he gives it a unique ID. He then queries for that ID and then executes functions which are stored within that component. And
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah, that's an interesting approach of doing dependency injection.
What's his last name again?
Moore, I think. Yeah, Kevin Moore.
Okay.
Yeah. I think his Twitter ID, not Twitter ID, sorry, GitHub ID is KevMoo. All lowercase, no spaces.
Yeah, it is a pretty cool way to think about it. There's another thing too about Polymer elements is that how you treat them is different if you're doing something like this where you're nesting them kind of out in the wild compared to if you're nesting them inside of a template as well. Because a lot of the examples that I've found were so somebody would take somebody would make like, so if you wanted to do something like this, you would create, another Polymer element, or you would nest Go data inside of Go Connect, inside of the template itself, and which obviously lets you do different things that way and lets you bind data in different ways. But I kind of like the idea of being able to put them out into the wild, and then like I was saying with the tubes, to kind of being able to stitch them together in a fairly controlled way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What about you, Christian? I know you said that you're kind of you're waiting for everybody else to figure it out, but like, have you seen a pattern that you like?
I honestly haven't used Polymer enough to make any judgment calls about it.
Okay.
I think it's a really interesting approach, and like I said before, I'm kind of the jury's out. Like Angular's been a really overall useful, productive thing for me, and because I spent time on both the front end and the back end, I'm already spread a little bit thin, so I can't get on every new framework and thing out there, or I never have time to
You're
get
too far onto the Golang train.
yeah, now it's Golang, so
yeah.
But this is, I mean, for me, this is really informative to see what you're doing, because at some point I'm thinking that that Polymer might be the winner. It still looks a little early.
Yeah, I don't know if Polymer will be like the quote unquote winner, but
Web components, though.
Yeah, that's just those in general. Just vanilla web components are really, really tempting. And I mean, and as soon as the more they come out, the more these other framework quote unquote frameworks are going to start to show up to just limit boilerplate, which is, I mean, Polymer gives you some other stuff, like with the templates and the two-way binding, and making it really easy to watch your attributes and other variables and things like that. But at the end of the day, the big part is the polyfill, which is one, which will get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then the other one is the limiting the boilerplate. Because if you ever try to make an element, a web component without something like Mozilla has Brick or Polymer, there's quite a bit of boilerplate just to get everything attached and get everything set up, compared to this, where you just
it's definitely an easier way to go for people who are used to jQuery or Angular or things like that, because they have a lot of nice, you don't have to worry about this things in there.
Yeah, there are a lot of things in it that remind me a lot of Angular. Because at this point, I started out with Ember, but at this point, I'd say I'm probably more experienced with Angular. And there are a lot of things in there. Both being Google products probably helps, but there are a lot of things in there that translate very, very, very well to web, specifically to Polymer.
I'm interested to hear, like, I know, James, you've been working on Dart stuff with the Polymer. Have you found that it's better as far as the interaction of elements, or worse, or just the same because it's ultimately the same JavaScript?
Are you talking about Dart versus JavaScript here?
Yeah, working with web components in Dart versus vanilla JavaScript, per se, or even Polymer or whatever.
Well, I must warn you, I am biased. But I do find it easier to use Dart, but not because of Polymer. However, I find that I don't know, a lot of the Dart Polymer stuff tends to be a little bit behind the JavaScript side of things. I mean, it's getting better, but you can't at the moment do direct, because there's a Dart version of the paper elements and core elements now.
That's cool.
But you can't do things like direct inheritance using those libraries, those packages,
Okay.
because of the way they've done it. because it's basically it's not a Dart port. It's actually just a wrapper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't in core Dart or whatever it is. You can't extend off of off of existing elements.
No, no,
Wow, that cuts out a
um,
whole bunch of stuff then.
not the core elements
Okay.
or the paper elements. However, you can do all those standard extending, inheriting. If you're just inheriting from one polymer Dart element to another, that all works.
Okay.
Okay, not as bad as I thought when you said that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Everything. Like, oh my
I don't
god.
want to give a false impression
Can't
here.
extend a button, you know? Like,
That's so. You'll have to forgive me because you're one of the first heavy Dart users that I've run across. That's so. Are you doing a lot of work with it, or is it just kind of a curiosity at this point?
It's not nothing I'm getting paid to do because not many people. There's not much demand for Dart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, I think that's just because it's not implemented in any of the browsers yet, right? So.
Yeah. There's quite a few barriers to actually using Dart in the real world at the moment. I mean, it's not impossible.
Yeah, because you can just compile Dart or quote unquote compile Dart down to a regular JavaScript, right?
Yes, you can, which is one of the saving graces.
Well, it's the same thing that with CoffeeScript or things like that, which is actually one of the reasons I don't like CoffeeScript. But Dart interests me a little bit more. That is interesting. So is there a way to so for example in Polymer, if there's a particular thing that you want to do with Polymer, but it's not exposed in native in Dart, is there a way that you can create your own wrappers for that kind of stuff?
Yes, if you're doing that using JavaScript directly from within Dart, yes, you can.
Okay.
They actually created an entire package just for that.
That's pretty.
And it's part of the core libraries too.
All right.
With Dart.js. And you can use it to call JavaScript code directly.
Okay.
I mean, I've just used it to interact with Google Maps.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
What do you think is the most compelling reason to use Dart for anything today?
I just find it a lot less confusing, but that's mainly because of my background of starting out learning how to program in Java.
Yeah.
Yeah, and little things like this keyword actually meaning exactly what I think it does, and that's referring to the class object and not the function.
Yeah.
And a number of times that's bitten me in the ass in the past.
So it's not broken the way that JavaScript is, or
well, if you want to put it that way, no.
JavaScript's not broken. As soon as just buy into the fact that everything's an object and you're fine.
Well, like JavaScript was my first language, really. So the prototype.
Me too.
Once I learned prototype, I had learned that first before learning classical inheritance. So
You poor bastard.
Yeah. Well, when I got
it
to
was
classical,
the
I
other
was
way
like, "That's it? That's all you got to do?" So I'm so used to prototypes, I don't even care about getting classes in JavaScript.
So you're
for me, it was the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, and they've made my little bit with Dart. They've made it look an awful lot like Java as well, unless I'm entirely off base.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of similarity with the Java syntax, but there's also a lot of similarity with JavaScript syntax as well. So sort of, you might think of it as taking the best of both worlds.
Nice.
Could think of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Danny, what else about communication can you tell us on this?
Yeah, I didn't mean to completely derail, but So this is kind of the preferred way of communicating back and forth with elements is with events, and then passing in its and then passing and then passing your data along, whatever shared bits of data go along with that. There are other things you can do with watchers, but it's a lot like Eric had mentioned before, where if you start to nest too deep, it becomes really, really complicated to find those your little rivers that you've got all the way down into your stuff, and it can get messy really quickly. If you're just doing something like this, where it's maybe just one thing, where you're going to have a couple nested elements, maybe one level deep, maybe two, I think it's probably a sufficient pattern to actually just be manually watching stuff that's going on. But I think and then changing it however you've decided to implement it. But I think that this is the best way to handle it, because, and now I'm just sound like I'm repeating myself again, but really it is just it breaks your encapsulation, but it's less actually fracturing it and more giving you a clean window in, that only the things that you want in and out are going to be let in and out.
Right.
So that's why I am a big fan of this pattern.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Danny.
No, I was going to say the example that I have here is the most involved that I've gotten with it. So it may not be the best example of people actually doing this really intensely, but hopefully it does demonstrate that point a little. It does demonstrate the point a little bit. And yeah, then what were you gonna say, Eric?
No, I was going to say one of the things that we didn't try, that we didn't get to, we just ran out of time, was working with local storage.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a Polymer element, as most of us know, in the core library for local storage, and Mozilla has a local forge Polymer too that they made. I think Andy Asbani made it.
Using IndexedDB.
Yeah, you could do a whole IndexedDB one. I'm sure somebody's working on that. But
Probably.
one of the things we didn't try was that. So I'm interested to see if that would work. And from the events and the adder stuff that we worked on, I kind of feel like we should try another pattern where we either application and have one level down. So we have these attributes that trigger events from the parent only. So you're having that's how the parent would talk to the outside world, but the children never talk to anything. They just have the adders that the parent watches, and we didn't really do that because we were trying to nest really deep.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got a chance to try it on your own, but that was just some thoughts I had while we were going through this.
I haven't got a chance to look at something specifically like that as much. I do think that it would be a good. It is interesting. I think the trickiest part with something like that is making sure that you're watching everything that's going on with the chip. So like ideally you would want to put almost anything in there without having to make a lot of changes.
Mm.
So at least in when thinking about the design of it, so I wouldn't want every time that I decide to make every time I make a new feature for something. So if every new feature is an element and you place it inside of its parent, and you place it inside of the parent, I potentially don't want to have to wire up things in the parent to make sure that it's watching it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice if it's automatically just looking at everything that's inside of it and then deciding if it can use what it has or not. But again, that's just personal preference in design, and which does not come through at all with the example that I have. But
no, I mean this particular example went through a lot of revisions. I remember.
Yeah, I think this is on. I think this is 5 or 6. So like some of the other stuff. Yeah, go away. So one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is a way that a way it was handled sometimes is in this pattern here, but where the elements themselves were treated almost just as utility libraries. So you can see here I'm actually firing. So I'm just getting references to my connection element and to my data element, and from there is where I'm actually firing the methods myself. So that's something else that I've seen. This is the type of one that I don't think I completely agree with. It makes sense, but this is the situation that I've run to where this is not doing anything that a utility library can't. You still have to learn. Maybe don't have to learn the more complicated API, but you still have to learn somebody else's wrapper for that, and implement it that way rather than something like I said, where you're watching attributes. I don't know what kind of. So if you had a bunch of elements and a bunch of things going on, and you're watching a lot of stuff, I don't know how big of a performance hit that might take down the road. But I think it would have to get fairly sizable before you would actually run into problems inside of your elements. If you keep throwing more and more elements on, there's all the kinds of other stuff you have to worry about. But
yeah, the more mutation observers, the more object observers, the more elements in general, it's gonna get messed up pretty quick. I mean, I guess you have a really good point with the too many elements, and then you have one controller that's doing so much.
Yeah.
So maybe that pattern would be better suited for a feature, right? Where the feature talks to an application where you use something like React.
You're right. Where you kind of break things down into very small modular pieces, almost the way that a pattern that I like a lot just for designing things in general is the way that Gulp does theirs, where each plugin does one thing, and I think that might be a good approach to take for web components, rather than having one element that does a bunch of things. Start breaking them down into smaller elements and then stitch them together with something else.
Right.
That's what I aspire to. Doesn't always work out.
No, it never does. It starts out great at the beginning of a project. You're like, oh man, this is the best thing I've ever done. At the end of the project, it's full of things you're like, just don't look at this. Don't judge me about it. It works.
Pass. Who cares, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't care my unit test pass because I commented out that one line that makes it pass. So it works. So go with it. Uh-oh. But yeah, that's kind of all I had for this topic specifically. Hopefully it was helpful. This is as in depth as Eric and I have gotten with it. At least I have gotten with it. Like I said, we've gone through quite a few revisions to get to something that's as simple, I think, as what we've currently got.
Yeah, I think it was worth it just to learn about how it really works. I was forced to work with the custom elements, which I had not used prior to that, except doing custom jQuery events, years ago. So
yeah, I do like how tightly things are kept with Angular. Not the overall design patterns, but like the way the repeaters work and things like that tie pretty closely with the way that a lot of people are used to with Angular. So I think after it starts to become, hopefully, becomes more and more more supported and more widely used in actual projects, it won't be as big of a transition for a lot of people. The Shadow DOM, I think, is going to be the trickiest part because that's something that's very, very foreign. the idea of not being able to get into something. But yeah, so I mean, do you guys have any other, any questions, comments, criticisms?
Do you have the source code for this out there somewhere in a gist or a repo?
This whole, it's up on my GitHub. So my GitHub is Danny Blue Design, all one word, no spaces, all that fun stuff. And I think, well, I actually want to, if I don't have the most up to date up there, I'll put it up. I'll make sure it's up there right now. But I think everything is the most up to date.
I have the original repository we worked on before that.
Yep, this is it, because I put a note in there that GoInstant is shutting down. But yeah, so all the source code.
The other one too.
Yeah. So yeah, the source code. So Danny Blue Design. It's called PolyInstant. If you guys want to go look at it, like Eric said, this is the most up to date, but a bunch of our other revisions are on Eric's GitHub, and some of the other stuff is in here too. So if you want to mess around with it, go ahead. I obviously do not care if you use my account or the web component test application. If you want to just mess around with how things work before the end of the month when it's all gone, then I'm forced to move to something else.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
I'm posting my GitHub is Nebraeka, Nebraeka. I don't think I have one repository that's actually good on there, but feel free to look.
There he is. But yeah, so that's like I said, that's all I've got. I do apologize for breaking out into some dark stuff, but conversation. It's all good, and I appreciate you answering. I appreciate you turning into it, us interviewing you about dark.
Yeah.
Did you have any other techniques that you used? I know I owed you a code example of the core Ajax. So.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, I don't really need an example.
I'm sure you've figured out a solution since. It's been like too long. But did you have any other techniques that you used?
For communication, well, you pretty much covered both of them. Both of the ones that I've thought about, apart from mutation observers, which you've already gone through. The one thing I would do that differently from what you've done in the example you're displaying here is instead of, and it's only really a tiny little thing, is where you got the query selector. Instead of querying for the actual Go data, I'd actually just query for the ID, and that way it doesn't actually matter what the actual element is, as long as it actually implements those particular functions you're calling.
Okay.
That's the only thing I'd do differently.
Okay. I can't remember. I go through when I'm doing especially just stuff on my own. I go through phases of whether I use query selector and query selector all, or if I grab things specifically. This particular day, I guess I liked query selectors, but that does make sense in an actual implementation.
That way it allows for a dependency injection.
Everybody likes dependency injection.
Yeah. It's a great buzzword.
It's so good.
Yeah, but I got that idea from, as I say, that guy called Kevin Moore.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to look that. I have to write that name down before I forget it. But I would like to see, hard examples of that kind of stuff.
Try GitHub account Kev Moo.
I'm gonna put it on the event to make a comment with it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, Kev Moo, .o.
Yep. Yeah, I posted it in the chat earlier.
This guy?
Yeah, I think that might be him.
that look like Kev Moo?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the guy.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll definitely have to. I'll definitely have to look into some of the Polymer stuff that he's done.
He's got a fire-based dart on there.
He's done a few. He's done a few Google talks as well. I think he might have done a Google I/O one as well. I think that's. Yeah, I think he actually did. He did a Google I/O talk.
Oh, cool. I
Last one.
I didn't get to see all of them. I don't think anybody got to see all of them.
No, I didn't.
Or one.
I'm not interested in half of them.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's very, very cool. You guys have anything else for me?
No, thank you, Danny. That was awesome.
Yeah, great work.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's like I said, this was the I was telling Christian this is the first time that I've really done something like this. So I was hoping for a small crowd and to not have my self-esteem trampled too terribly. So I am feeling all right.
Awesome.
It's a win-win all round.
Yeah, it's a pretty good day. Pretty good day.
You're doing more.
I will do as many as I feel like I can actually talk about.
We're trying to get somebody for React for a future.
Yeah, next month, Nick Niemeyer, a friend of mine, works at New Relic in Portland, and he has been working quite a bit with React lately, and is looking to give us the dirt on how it works inside. So
that's pretty cool. I know absolutely nothing about React, so that will be nice.
I'd be interested to see why they reckon it's better than the NDV model.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, not NDV, NVC.
MV Star.
MV whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if React is really a full-blown framework like that. It seems like more of a library that deals with certain kinds of rendering. So I have not used it yet, but I keep hearing that it's blistering fast for keeping the DOM up to date with your data. So
Yeah,
it seems like
it doesn't watch everything like Angular does. It stores it in its own virtual DOM, and then at the last possible moment places it in the DOM.
yeah, and it doesn't change the entire DOM when it renders something, which is one reason it's so fast. It actually does object diffing. So it looks to see what's changed, and it only changes those parts of the DOM where the data will affect it. So for that reason, it's supposed to be working with very large data sets well. Good performance. So, I have seen people using it with Angular and with other things, so you can probably use it with Polymer too.
Yeah, I would imagine.
You can that's what I kind of love about web components. So like all these other frameworks. So Ember components and Angular directives live inside of their various framework worlds, and web components can live wherever you decide to put them, which I think is one of the reasons I like them so much. It's not obviously Polymer is depending on Polymer's stuff, but a web component itself, as long as the browser supports it, you can use it in Polymer. You can use it in Angular. You can use it in Ember. You could use it in Backbone. You could use it in anything that you feel like, which is again why, again, broken record, small digestible pieces so that you can use different things in different places. Eric and I and Christian were on a podcast with Rob Dodson from the Polymer team, and he always talks about them as a very building block or Lego way of building a web page or building an app. And and all that interop is really, really cool.
Christian had a quote from the podcast, not that episode, but another one we did, where he had said web components seem like that the most important part about it is the composability. If I'm paraphrasing this, but the reusability is great, but the composability is what makes it powerful.
Sounds like a T-shirt.
I think that, yeah, something to that degree. I forget what the exact quote is, but I was editing one of the episodes. I'm like, that's a good one. Because it's so true. Like, I think it's true before web components, though, too, just composing of these things. And Rob Dodson was just on JavaScript Jabber today. I don't know if you guys got to listen, but
I did not. I'll probably listen tomorrow.
he had said on there, he said that someone at Google had explained it, the shadow DOM, and said it's kind of like when you program something in C++, and every C application has this main function that everything goes in, and you quickly learn that you don't want to put everything in the main. So you have to have these little pieces, these little parts, and that would be like the shadow DOM, how that is to the DOM itself. It was a good podcast. Check it out.
That's another T-shirt. The Shadow DOM is the main int void of the web component world.
I just like that name. It sounds so mysterious.
It is a good, well, especially for, I mean, some programming stuff have some good names, but usually not. It's usually pretty dumb. Shadow DOM is pretty. It sounds like it's not real, which is why it's a good name.
Sounds like a spy versus spy thing.
Yep.
Nobody talks about decorators though, because it's just a spec.
That's why nobody talks about decorators. You're too bleeding edge, Eric. Just too bleeding edge for me.
I'm gushing blood here. I don't know. I think it's going to be one of those things that's either retracted after it's implemented, or it'll be really awesome.
I don't know if it will actually ever come out.
Well, we'll see. It'll come out in one browser at least.
Well, it'll come out in a weird off version of Chrome Canary, and that's it.
I'll be there.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot for listening to me. Just, like I said, blabber on about something I thought was kind of cool. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll do it again.
Thanks for giving the talk.
Hopefully we can all be there for the React one when we do it.
Yeah. Make sure as soon as you know like what the actual date of it is gonna, or I guess the date's always the same. I'm gonna do my best to try to be there for that because React sounds pretty cool.
Sweet.
And maybe James wants to do one about Dart.
Maybe.
So is the innards of Dart.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Thanks. Have a good night, everybody.
Right. See you later.